let's move on to an even tougher issue. Should members of Parliament get a 7% pay rise? Let's put it into context. I think that will be the highest in the public sector. Members of Parliament are currently paid £86,000. The proposal is that it will go up by some £6,000 to just over £92,000. It is not determined by MPs. It is determined by an independent pay body, which will consider its own findings in January and may or may not award this pay rise. Jonathan, do you think it's a good idea, MPs get a 7% pay rise?
Well, I think that everyone deserves a pay rise in line
even
with inflation.
MPs?
Well, look, some of your cohort don't necessarily deserve that much money, Jake. I'm not sort of talking about you personally, obviously. But I think as a general principle, when you have soaring inflation, wages should rise in line with it. What I think is wrong is if MPs are getting a massive pay rise and public servants across the board are not and are going on strike as a result of it, that, I think, will stick in the craw for people across the country. But I don't, in principle, think that people should get real...
5% for the armed forces, for prison police officers, 7%. MPs get a bigger pay rise than the armed forces, Samantha, quickly?
I think that MPs should have been paid a great deal more than they have been for the past 100 or so years. I think that MPs, we're not ready as a country to have that conversation, but MPs should be paid in line with the enormity of the job that they're doing. OK,
well, we're going to come back to this. I'm quickly going to tell you my view on MPs' pay rises, because obviously I am in line to get this 7% pay rise if it's approved. I don't think they should get it. I think members of Parliament's pay should be linked to economic growth. MPs should only get a pay rise if they grow the economy. What would that mean? Back in 2022, they would have got a 4.3% pay rise. This year, they get a 0.6% pay rise. And if the economy goes into recession, you should cut MPs' pay. Link members of Parliament's pay and other people in the public sector, like the civil servants, link their pay to economic growth. I think you might find we would then have the fastest growing economy probably in the entire world if you did performance-related pay. They do it in Singapore, by the way. It works in Singapore. I think it's a very good idea. I'm not sure many of my colleagues would want a pay cut if we went into recession, but, you know, boo-hoo, work a bit harder, do your job better. Right, moving on. NHS dentists, I was just upset. The entirety of Parliament all in one. No matter what party you're from, I just upset you. So this sort of feels to me like I actually have got an NHS dentist. I go to the Whitworth dental practice. Quite nice teeth, there we go, they do a good job. But it seems to me when I speak to my constituents, talk to them, is they just cannot find an NHS dentist. And this extraordinary report today says that in the southwest, to pick on one region, 99% of dentists are not taking on any more NHS patients. 71% across the UK are not taking on any more NHS patients. This is, Jonathan, a really, really tricky situation for people with young families and people like me and all of us here who want to see an NHS. You just can't find them.
It's a damning indictment of not just your government and its dismal failure on the NHS, but also sort of collective governments over the last few decades which have not prioritised the key components of people's health, which is dentistry. The whole principle of the NHS is that it should cover the gamut of people's health from cradle to grave. That is not what we have in this country. Even the best of the NHS, it doesn't deal with sort of social care at the end of people's lives. If you have Alzheimer's, you know, that's basically sort of out of the remit of the NHS de facto. And dentistry is another key thing. So we have essentially in this country, we pride ourselves on our NHS, the pride of the world. The dentistry is essentially the preserve of the rich, and that is a shocking indictment.
Well, we're hitting a two-tier system, aren't we? Where people actually who can pay are choosing to pay. You just cannot get access. I'm very lucky. I've got an a brilliant NHS dentist, if he's watching. He's very good. But it's a two-tier system. I mean, Samantha, West Streeting today proposed a £20,000 golden hello bonus. The Labour Party's policy to get more people to work in the NHS as dentists. They have to work for a set number of years. I can't remember, a few years. I think it's quite a good idea, don't you?
I suppose as much as I might sound like a little bit of a Scrooge saying this, throwing more money at the NHS is not going to solve the problems that we have. It isn't. Labour can bang on as much as they want about chronic underfunding of the NHS. It isn't chronic underfunding, it's chronic misfunding. We have an NHS that is bloated and absolutely, I mean, it's one of the biggest sources of the government's budget every year, and yet we aren't able to access our vital services. That doesn't speak to a service that's underfunded. It speaks to a service that isn't putting that money into the right place places. I mean, of the 4,900 odd dental surgeries across the country, 82% aren't adding new over 18s to the list. 71% of children, people who are from working class backgrounds who can't afford to pay. I myself, I'm at university. I have been trying for 2.5 years to find a good dentist in the Northeast. And while there are some, most of them are only private. And most
and
NHS
it's expensive,
dentists,
so
exactly.
it's just over 20 quid
Exactly.
to see an NHS dentist on average for your checkup. 70 plus pounds is in this article. Really interesting. And that's why we are asking you at home today, have you simply given up on trying to find an NHS dentist? We want to hear from you on 0344 499 1000. And we've got our first caller. So let's go to Sharon in Salford, who wants to talk to me about NHS dentistry on the brink. Sharon, thank you very much for calling the show. What's your experience in Salford?
Well, I'm an NHS dentist, and my surgery is empty for 2.5 days a week because I can't get any funding to do NHS dentistry.
So I've heard this before, actually. So is this a cap on the number of patients you're able to take on? I think that's what you're saying. And if so, who sets that cap?
The local dental, Greater Manchester.
But, you know, what's it all about? I mean, we've got, you know, the fact that you've called the switchboards jammed, this report says that people can't find an NHS dentist. Is it being rationed because of budgets? Is it simply that the government needs to put more money into it?
Yes, it's the local authority, the dental people, that won't. I've tried everything. That we've got an influx of people who can't afford to live in London. I advertised in the local paper, was inundated. I'm willing to do NHS dentistry, but they won't give me the funding.
Wow. Well, maybe that's part of the issue. Maybe the thing that Samantha says is wrong. Maybe it is simply a matter of money. When you did advertise as taking on new NHS patients, what was the sort of demand like? We hear about in this article.
Unbelievable.
What sort of thing did you see, Sharon?
We've got big families here in this area with like 6-8 children with terrible teeth. We had massive amount of people phoning. We've got waiting lists. Even now, we get 10, 15 people phoning a day. And I'm willing to do it.
So, Sharon, what can and should we be doing to try and, to try and unblock this? Is this just a matter of political will, or is it money that is in the NHS in Greater Manchester that's been diverted to other services, like catching up with COVID and things like that? Is this not a priority for your local NHS trust?
The thing is, they're doing loads of courses for all sorts of things that really aren't necessary, like diversity. They're doing courses on that. That money could be put into dentistry. We in the past, we went to schools. We were paid to go to schools and teach them about brushing, because I'm very preventive orientated, and they stopped that. And also they allocate how many units of dental activity to each dentist. And, you know, I've asked them, I've begged them. I said, we're desperate. And they allocated us 100 units, which is equivalent to £300. Well, it only matters about 20 patients, that.
Well, Sharon, thank you so much. And thank you for all the work you do supporting people in the city of Salford. I am just massively depressed to hear about the situation you find yourself in, and it speaks to this huge challenge. Thank you so much for calling the show. Jonathan, there we go. It's a cap on numbers. I think most people aren't aware that local health authorities cap numbers. So it's sort of rationing dentistry for waiting almost to get your NHS roll number with your dentist, isn't it?
So, Jake, it sounds as though you're a convert to increased funding and sort of an end to austerity and cuts.
Well, I think
because we have a massive cuts to local government funding.
Let's just be absolutely clear. Public spending has gone up every single year since 2010. So it's all very well to about austerity. We are spending more money on the NHS than we ever have in history.
What about funding the dentistry?
If money, I don't know. I don't have the figures. I'm not going to pretend I do know. But if money was the only answer, we would be living in a an NHS dentistry utopia.
No one
because we have never spent more cash on it.
No one says money is the only answer. It's also about how you spend the money. It's also about how you govern things.
Labour seems to think that money's the only answer.
No, I don't think that if Wes Streeting was here, he would completely deny that, Samantha. He would say that it's about how you govern. It's about how you. Obviously, everyone agrees. Everyone agrees that obviously I could sort of put sort of £1,000 on the table right now and burn it. I've spent £1,000. It's about how you divert that money, how you channel that money. Clearly, we seem to have an issue, and you'll forgive me for saying this because the British public seems to agree with me. We have a trust and competency deficit in the Conservative Party, which is why you're so far behind in the polls. People don't think you're very good at running things right now. Clearly, it's about not only about money, it's about what you do with that money, about the resources, the management, the administration, about sort of getting the right people to staff.
But actually, if you look at both leaders, it's all very well to say, if you look at both of these, they're both really unpopular. Actually, we've got a bigger problem in this country with people just saying a plague on all your houses, haven't we?
This sounds like you're making a plea to NHS middle management more than anything else, because, as you said yourself, throwing money at the wall isn't the answer if it's being managed poorly, and it isn't the government at the end of the day that is saying, oh, £10 is going to go to you, this money is going to go to dentistry. No, the NHS is fundamentally
that's
poorly
NHS
managed.
England. The government doesn't actually control that.
Precisely.
It's NHS. Anyway, coming up.